Charlie mentioned earlier. And as you know, we're in the VAB for a pretty good while because we got a lot of work to do there. And then we go through rollout, and we understand that we do have certain loads on the rocket as we roll to the pad. And so I'm not going to speculate anymore. What I said earlier is we're going to let the teams go off and look at the data that we got over the day yesterday and see how that addresses things that we might need to do different moving down the road, or maybe we just look at operationally if we do something different.
And I'll take the question about the additional potential launch opportunity dates. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier when we were talking about other potential windows or launch periods beyond April, there's an enormous amount of analyses that has to go into determination of which of those dates actually have appropriate launch windows that we can use that are, we want something that's in general at least 2 hours in duration so that we can have a good chance of getting off on that date. And then all of the constraints I mentioned, thermal control, eclipses for power, communications. And so what we had done with March 3rd, which we had been looking at, is that the preliminary analysis was kind of on the edge, and so it was originally taken off of the plate, and we already knew that the 4th and the 5th were not viable at all for some of those reasons, and so there wasn't a whole lot of the additional work wasn't really done on the 3rd, but we started really sharpening our pencils of trying to maximize the number of days. Could we eke out another day in March that could be viable? And so in particular, the Orion team went off and started looking at it and looking at not just the nominal case and the baseline case, but they have to look at all of the off nominal cases, all of the potential scenarios that we might end up in. And how the Orion spacecraft would still be able to perform, keep our crew safe, and be able to return back to Earth in a safe configuration. And so that took an enormous amount of work, but they went and they did that. They did all of that additional analyses. They ultimately did determine that the 3rd could have been a viable date, but with the work that we had ahead of us, it just didn't seem feasible, particularly following Wet Dress 1 and considering the work that needed to be done with replacing the seals and replacing the filter. And so we opted to eliminate that as an available date. But I anticipate as we go through the systematic approach that we have for assessing each of the viable or the available launch dates, we'll go through those. We already have, I believe, a rough cut at those for May and June and beyond, but we'll continue to refine those. And as I said earlier, as we sharpen our pencils and we start to get a better understanding of exactly which of those dates are available, we'll make those available to you guys as well.
We're staying on the phones. We have quite a bit there. Stephen Clark, Ars Technica.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. John Honeycutt just answered my main question, but I'll follow up on the seals. What are the seals made of? What material? And remind me, was there any difference between or design change made in the seals themselves between Artemis 1 and 2? That's for John, I guess. And for Charlie, we heard some things. You mentioned the comms issue during the countdown and also the booster avionics issue that came up during the terminal count, I guess, yesterday. Can you kind of just go over, what the path forward is on resolving those? Thanks.
So it's a metallic ring that fits between the two interfaces, and the metallic rings has the sealing material built up on it. It's Teflon, and then it's kind of a complex geometry to the spring because it's got a spring assist feature to it all around the seal, and then even I believe it's the 4-inch seal is actually a pressure assisted seal. So, but no, there's been no change since Artemis 1 in the design.
Okay, Joey Roulette, Reuters.
I had a quick question on the communications issues that was mentioned earlier on this call. I know it's not an exciting thing that happened, but I'm just curious to know what was causing that, what the fix was, what the situation is there. Thank you.
Yeah, so I can take that. We did experience a communications issue yesterday. We were able to track it down to a network configuration issue, and so we've been able to take corrective actions to ensure that we don't have that happen again. One thing I'll also say is that we were able to go through, while it wasn't planned to demonstrate yesterday, we did go through a contingency procedure that we run in the event that we have a loss of comm, and we implemented that yesterday. It worked great. The only slight holdup that we had was when the comm issue, when we encountered it, it was just as we were getting ready to take hydrogen from slow fill to fast fill, and I did ask the team to hold up. I didn't want to go to fast fill until we had stable comm, just because in the event that we were to have something happen, I wanted to make sure that we could communicate across our team. But we do have a contingency plan that involves test nets on our radios that we utilize, and so we did go through and deploy those yesterday in the firing room, and we were able to keep communication with our team while the comm network team was able to go troubleshoot and isolate the problem and get us back stable.
Okay. Nicole from the Canadian Broadcast Company is on the phone. Go ahead, Nicole.
Actually, that was my question. I was going to ask about the comms issue. But, I mean, you seem pretty confident that this won't creep up again. I'm asking because this also occurred during the first attempt with Artemis I. Had you changed anything since then with comms?
An issue like this during Artemis I, I do not recall any issues that we had like this with the communication system during Artemis I. We had a different comm system during Artemis I than the one that we have in place today, and I don't recall any communication issues during Artemis I.
Okay, let's see if there are new hands in the room because we still have quite a bit on the phone. We'll go here. And then we'll go back to the phones.
Hi, Bert Dicht with the National Space Society. A question for John. At the pre-rollover press conference, you mentioned the enormous responsibility of the MMT and that we're not going to be going till we're ready. We've made a lot of progress since then. I'm just wondering, as we're moving toward launch, what will you be looking at specifically? Is there anything that maybe concerns you or is keeping you up at night?
Now, are you talking relative to the MMT or the hardware?
To the MMT.
Yeah, so, you know, we did talk, we looked at it, and I think the leadership above me agreed at some point in time in this path today, we needed to do more to get ready. I feel like at this point we have demonstrated a significant amount of improvement to where I am almost happy. And I may not ever be happy, I don't know. But I'll tell you, we have another sim, in-space sim planned at JSC for the MMT on Monday. And then, you know, knock on wood, we want to go fly as soon as we can in the launch window. But if something opens up there, and God forbid that to happen, I'll be looking at other things we can go do to stay sharp.
All right, we have time for two more on the phone. Tariq Malik, space.com.
Yes, thank you very much. Charlie, you mentioned that during this fueling test, the Artemis II crew, you know, they weren't participating, but that they were observing. And I'm just curious kind of what their reactions or their input was that you got after the fact about what they're thinking now that we're past this milestone, and that you've got March 6th on the horizon.
Yeah, so we were really lucky to have our flight crew in the firing room, 3 of the 4 members observing the test, and I would say that they were excited to be there with the team, and pretty pleased with all of the results. So, you know, I wouldn't want to put words in their mouth, but I think they were as happy or maybe happier than I was, and I was certainly thrilled with the results.
Hey, Reed said in the MMT bubble with us, and in particular he set right next to the Moon to Mars chief engineer. And he stayed right there through the whole time. And Reed made the same observation that I made earlier today. He's been either directly tracking or indirectly tracking what this team's doing to improve, and he saw that and he noted it to me after we finished the test. So he reflected on the launch team and the MMT.
All right, Andrea Leinfelder, Houston Chronicle, you have the last question of this press briefing. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask another question about the communications. I recall there were communication blackouts during the first wet dress rehearsal for the Artemis II mission. And there was an alert or a news update that said it had been an ongoing issue. So is there a larger issue with the communications? And, did going to the contingency plan yesterday provide confidence that, that plan would work on launch day if there was another communications issue? Thank you.
So we did have a comm issue during wet dress 1, and there's been like many communication issues, just a reflection of technology, if you will. They can happen for a lot of different reasons. And so the team has been working very diligently to determine as we go through each of them, and not all of them are the same. Sometimes it is related to, some of the comm issues can be related to, some configuration between centers. And so you may have heard that. We had some of that in one of our wet dress where we had some of our loops that weren't connected in the way that we expected, which is why we do wet dress, so we can figure out all these things so on launch day that we get all this configuration and all of this mapping correctly. And so that was one form of the comm issues that we've had. We've also had another issue on a prior test where we dropped out of what was called duplex to simplex mode within the server, which is that the comm essentially worked just fine, but the redundancy wasn't there. And so you may have heard us speak about that. Yesterday's issue was something completely different. It wasn't within the voice comm system itself, but it was in the network. So hopefully, as we have worked our way through this, pinpointing each and every one of these root causes and correcting them, hopefully on launch day we don't see this. We'll certainly be putting operational controls in place as well for once we get our config in place and freezing it once we test it out. So there'll be some operational controls that come along with that. And was there another part to the question? Oh, our backup plan. So, because we had some issues before, we wanted, with wet dress 1, we wanted to make sure that we had, one of the things that I think NASA does really well is we learn from the data that we're given, and then you try to take that and you apply it and you think about, well, what could the next failure be and how would we address that? And so we had a comm issue. We thought about, we went and corrected the issue that we had, and then we thought about, well, what if this happened? And what if it happened in the most dynamic state? And what would we do? And how would we address that? And that's where the contingency plan came up. We had that proceduralized, so it wasn't something we were doing yesterday. We had radios available in the firing room. We had people designated that would be available to provide those as they were needed. We knew what channels we would use. It was all in our procedures. And so while I hope to not execute that on launch day, I certainly know that if we need to, that it is available to us. And I know you said that was our last question, but I want to go back because I didn't answer, I think, between the multiple questions, it got missed. But someone asked about the issue that stopped us in terminal count, because we always plan to count down and hold at a minute 30. We did not plan to have an issue. We did have an issue, which was booster power 001, which looks at it basically looks at 3 measurements. 2 of them are from the ground and 1 is from the booster onboard battery, and it's just making sure that we have the right voltage to support the mission. And so what happened is that the flight measurement looked great, it was solid, and we saw a delta to the between what the ground side was seeing. So we're going to go take a look at that. It was no constraint to yesterday. We're not going to fly, and so we knew that we were in a good position to press on. We did that, but we will be going and looking into that and figuring out why we saw that delta between the ground and the flight. Certainly between the two, you want your flight measurement to be sound, because that's the one you're going to go fly with. The ground one's going to be left behind, but we'll go work that out and figure that one out. But that was the issue someone asked about that stopped us in term count yesterday.
Thank you so much for that follow-up. Charlie, as you can see, we try to get to as many of you and as many of your questions as possible, but we do have to wrap up today's news conference now. Again, thank you so much for your questions, and thank you, of course, to Lori, Charlie, and John here. And as you heard them say, we are going to target our first March opportunity, March 6th, pending any open work. But ahead of that attempt, we'll, of course, host more of these briefings so that you can stay up to date on our progress. But until then, everyone can learn more about this mission by going to nasa.gov/Artemis. We're pulling that up on the screen right now. Again, nasa.gov/Artemis. Again, thank you everyone for your interest, for your questions, and have a great rest of your day.